Good morning, folks. How are you doing? It is 8:35 in the morning on a Saturday, the 25th day of January, 2025. 25 125. Good morning. It is cold outside. It was 34 degrees this morning when I had to walk my dog and feed my outside cats. Very cold. I picked the wrong week to fucking shave my head. I cut my hair. I really did. um, I've always been on top of it when it comes to timing. I wrote an article yesterday morning, and I thought I would let it sit and get some feedback from folks before making this video. And feedback it got. Um, we'll talk about the article. We'll talk about the what I see as the evidence behind it. There we go. It's better. We'll talk about that. We'll talk a little bit about there's 4 more hostages that have been released by the Palestinians, 4 Israeli young women, soldiers from the IDF, who, by the way, perfectly healthy, happy. And I saw something very interesting. Let me show you that real quick, that I thought I would share with folks. I have never in my life, and I am now 58 years old, and I have been a supporter of the Palestinian movement. Jesus. I can't say I guess the majority of it, yeah. I was a supporter of it tacitly in college, so yeah, vast majority of it. But I've never seen in my life Palestinian prisoners being freed by their IDF captors being cheered by Jewish Israelis and smiling and waving and giving the thumbs up the Palestinian captors back to their Jewish captors or citizens in a rally like this, in a event like this. I've never seen that, and I know I never will, because of what I know about how the IDF treats their political prisoners. I wrote on this article a little note at the top, and I said that I would love to hear the story from them, the actual story from those 4 young women, about the truth about their 15 months in captivity. That would make an amazing story. Unfortunately, the IDF picked them up from the Red Cross, and so did Shin Bet, for quote-unquote health evaluations. As you can see, they clearly need health evaluations. I mean, the one still has her prescription glasses. They are all healthy. They are all happy. They are all clean. They will be commanded by the IDF to listen to the Shin Bet liars, propagandists, and intelligence assets, spin stories for them each detailing the cruel treatment by those people they are smiling at and cheering at and waving at and saying goodbye to. And the Israeli people will believe it, because the Israeli people, for the most part, are racist. And they need to believe it. Otherwise, the mythology, the mythos of Israeli Jewish supremacy crashes on the rocks. they treat people the way they claim people treat them. This is pathological. But it is true. That's the last, most honest thing you will see from those 4 young women. I have been on the record. I have said multiple times that they should release all the hostages immediately. And I've been saying that for 6 months. That it's not their fault. They've had them long enough. I said that they should contact the Red Cross and turn them all over. And I told them, I said in the videos, that that would be the best thing to bring a real true ceasefire. Hostages mean nothing. Nothing to the Israelis. They would rather kill them themselves and then blame the Palestinians for it than be forced to fucking actually negotiate a ceasefire deal because of the hostages. 200 Palestinians have been released. They took 3 buses into the West Bank. In a video later, we're going to talk about the West Bank. We're going to talk about what's happening in the West Bank. They released them. I don't know their condition yet. Videos have not been out, but I'm sure there will be stories to tell there as well. And let's be honest. Let's be honest. What we see, the release images, the handing them over, the signing of the thing with the people from the Red Cross and them saying goodbye. We understand that staged. We understand that staged for this very purpose, so that people can look at them and go, they've been. What you can't stage is their health, their conditions. What you can't stage is their genuine emotional reaction. I imagine that they were certainly treated much better than Palestinians in captivity being held by the IDF, and there's no all the evidence is on my side there. And indeed, that image of them handing them over was in some ways propaganda. Clearly, it was. Whether they made sure to tell all the people who were on the square not to yell and say nasty things to the former IDF or current IDF soldiers being handed over. Who knows? I'm sure that's a factor because all around them is the destruction of Gaza City. They're in a square in the middle of Gaza City handing them over. And I'm sure most of them, many of them, they seem to be all males, were probably resistance fighters who were given the orders to cheer and be happy and be pleasant and not yell obscenities at them for being fucking Jewish supremacists who were responsible for destruction of the city all around them. Of course, those 4 weren't, because they've been in captivity since October the 7th. But they represent something that was responsible. So I'm sure that's part of it. But what you can't, the Palestinians can't tell them. What are the Palestinians going to tell the girls? Act like you're happy, smile, act like you're healthy, or we'll shoot you in the head right here in front of all these. That's not going to happen. So what you can't fucking fake and what you can't propagandize is their honest reaction at the time. I'm sure that there's a fascinating story surrounding those 4 women and the last 15 months of their lives, which will be propagandized for the rest of their lives. Like, I don't know. I'll give you a prime example that goes right along with the topic of the day. The first Apollo fucking mission, astronauts who had to come down and sit at a table on a stage uncomfortably and act so proud for being the first human beings to ever stand on the surface of the moon. You watch those fucking, you watch the videos of those at that press conference, you'll notice something really interesting about their fucking demeanors. Very interesting. So, that's where we are. The video I'm going to do later today, I think, will be about how sick I am of these fucking Palestinians running around the states acting as if because they're Palestinians, they have the authority to talk about. Their appeal to authority is unpenetrable. Yet, they're all talking about no two-state solution, and there's got to be a one-state solution, and what do we know? We're not Palestinians. These are the kind of Palestinians, usually from the West Bank, who are currently working with the IDF to attack, arrest, shoot, kill Palestinian resistance fighters in the West Bank. These are collaborator Palestinians. You know, I love these Palestinian resistance or solidarity movements that are now being led by academics who have spent time in Palestine, spent time in the West Bank, spent time with those very same fucking Fatah, Palestinian Authority, sycophantic, sellout, collaborator Palestinians, who now come back to the United States and they want to infiltrate and then take over existing Palestinian solidarity groups like those, I don't know, run by college kids in places like, oh, I don't know, Abbotsford, British Columbia, take over these things and then undermine them, undercut them, push for a one-state solution, and break them apart through cognitive dissonance. It's called cognitive infiltration, and that's what they do in order to break up or to reduce the amount of solidarity people in a certain area have with the Palestinians. And they are themselves not Palestinian, but they work and have been closely associated with Fatah and the Palestinian Authority. We'll talk about the Palestinian Authority. We'll talk about Mahmoud Abbas. We'll talk about traitors. We'll talk about people like that. That's, of course, that's what the Israelis and the Trump administration and the Biden administration, that's what they wanted to, that's the model they wanted to impose in Gaza. Why? Because Mahmoud Abbas and Fatah are collaborators. They're the Vichy French of Palestine. That's why Palestinians in Gaza don't particularly like them. They don't particularly like Fatah. They don't particularly like the Palestinian Authority. They don't particularly like Mahmoud Abbas, who, by the way, won an election in 2005. 2006, the election in Gaza was supposed to go to Fatah because the United States and Israel worked it. But Hamas won because they are a resistance organization, a resistance party based on Palestine for Palestinians. And so they won, surprisingly to the Americans and the Israelis. And ever since then, Mahmoud Abbas has led the Palestinian Authority. He's now 89 years old, 88 years old. He's older than Joe Biden. And he's more feeble than Joe Biden. And he's a bigger sellout than Joe Biden, to be frank. But that's why we say the U.S., Israel, Trump administration, Biden administration, the UK, they all say, we need to get rid of Hamas. Hamas are the terrorists. Because Hamas resists. What they want is Fatah or something Fatah-like in fucking Gaza, so they can bust it up into Bantustans like apartheid South Africa, just like they did in the West Bank. And bust off pieces of it for development for the big developers. Like Stephen Witkoff, who's a developer from New York, who's the special envoy to the crisis between Israel and Palestine. Like Jared Kushner, the son-in-law of Donald Trump, who went there last year and said, this property is valuable. We could really develop the heck out of this. Good weather, Mediterranean Sea. Just think of what we can build. That's Project 2030, something that the Zionists have been pushing for quite some time. That's what they want. And as long as people in the real resistance tolerate these Fatah sympathizers or members who have come over from Palestine and say, I'm a Palestinian, you got to listen to me, I will lead your organization. These are Cass Sunstein infiltrators. Because they don't believe in what the resistance out here and what the solidarity groups out here believe in. And that is a Palestinian state for Palestinians. The ability to chart their own course. Self-determination. A nation state recognized by the entire world. Right now, the nation state is recognized by 151 of 192 UN member states. That is a vast majority. And the only reason the others aren't is because the others don't is because the United States will punish them if they recognize a Palestinian state. Not because it doesn't exist. It does exist. So when these folks come along pushing their one-state solution, telling you that Hamas is a terror organization, I just want you to understand that that's what they are, that's who they are, and we should be able to recognize them immediately, and in doing so, dismiss their contributions. Because in the United States, people on the left and people on the right are both Americans. You can disagree all you want, but they're both Americans. In France, during World War II, the Vichy French and the Resistance French, they aren't both fucking French. There's a difference. Once you sign on to hail ants, once you give up your autonomy, once you agree to collaborate with the occupier who is trying to destroy your identity and destroy your state, then you are no longer a member of that state. Is that a controversial opinion? No. People on the left and people on the right in the United States, a Trump follower, a Harris follower, an Obama follower, a Rand Paul follower, a fucking Biden follower, a Pelosi follower, a Reagan follower, a fucking FDR follower. That's all well and good. There are differences, obviously. And when we start to look at each other and go, you're a Nazi, you're this, you're that, simply because they follow a different fucking ideology. That's not necessarily Nazi ideology. Sometimes it is. With malice to none and charity to all. Somebody once said that during a fucking war. The idea is that we are all one people. We are all one nation. And whether you are on the left or on the right, you will still defend this nation and what it stands for, supposedly what it stands for. And we have to see that amongst ourselves, even as we argue and squabble about abortion or taxes or whatever the fuck else we disagree on. But one thing we know about each other is you are always an American, and you are always to be given the fucking rights and respect of an American, as long as you don't sell us out to someone else. Once you do that, all bets are off. You renege. This is what Fatah is. This is what the collaborators are in the West Bank. And there are very, very few that they've been rooted out in Gaza, but there are still some. This is, if you are a collaborator, if you are a sellout to the fucking occupiers, then you no longer qualify. You no longer are allowed, you can no longer expect to be given the treatment, the respect that the Palestinians receive from us. Does it make myself clear? Learn to notice the difference. Later we'll talk about more information on BB sent me some stuff, and I found some stuff on Fatah and the Palestinian Authority collaborating with the Israelis in this new assault, post-ceasefire assault taking place currently right now in the West Bank. The last news I heard on that was there was an Israeli incursion, military incursion, being assisted by collaborators that was repelled by the resistance. So that's good. Let's talk about my article a bit. Shall we? The Elon 2025, a Nazi Space Odyssey. I want to make sure people understand something. There's a difference between what I'm talking about here and this. There's a big difference. Can you read that? Yeah, Nazis rebuilt UFO and made super soldiers on Mars. That was January 2022. It's 3 years ago. Super soldiers at the spaceship. I'm sure that's not supposedly that. That's just a kind of a joke thing. This is a Daily Star. Super soldiers, Mars, Nazis. This is a real thing, by the way. I've had feedback from folks on my article, and we'll talk about the feedback for a second. Some people just don't want to talk about it. Some people, of course, they say that that's absurd. That's not what's going on. They're building underground cities. That's what's going on. Some people say that AI is a big thing. This $500 billion in AI, it's really meant to remove us, replace us, so they can do away with us, and they can use the AI for all the things that we would do in living in the underground cities. I don't know. And then, of course, I have at least one expert, and of course all kinds of comments, but I mean, at least one expert on aliens. Somebody who has written 2 books on the subject. told me that I'm behind the times, I'm wrong, I'm behind the times. My story was behind the times. Because the reality is, they've been on Mars with bases and super soldiers for decades now. I should also mention the individual who told me that is a very smart dude, from what I understand, and actually had the opportunity to meet a super soldier who's in the community, runs around talking about all his exploits as a super soldier. Turns out after meeting him, he's a total fucking grifter and a fraud. He's also like 5'2". Teenage mutant ninja super soldier. I don't know if he's met and talked to others that didn't turn out to be frauds. However, truly believes this. There's a bunch of QAnon folks who pushed this story, and it's gotten bigger and bigger. It seems to be tied into a lot of the Trump fans seem to go along with this story. The super soldiers. I remember years ago, Robert David Steele, whatever his fucking name. You know, the guy who died during the COVID days. He was on fraud, total fraud, dude. He was on fucking Alex Jones. And he talked about the super soldier program. Why? Because it was a big thing for the Trumpites. And it's a big story. They can, wrap their heads into it. And of course, the Nazis found a spaceship in Antarctica. And of course, the Nazis rebuilt said spaceship and made another said spaceship, flew it to Mars, colonized Mars, and then, of course, started a super soldier program using alien DNA and had space battles with other alien races, and for some reason are defending the planet from invasions from other alien races from Mars. And of course, then they come back here after a 20-year stint, and their age is reset, but they're still super soldiers, like the 5'1" teenage mutant ninja super soldier, and they live the rest of their lives. This is something that I'm going to share with you what I've come up with. I just want you to know that my thing is behind the times and it's just plain wrong. This is the reality. There's a good film called Nazis on Mars, which is kind of a spoof of this. But let me get rid of this. And we'll get back to something behind the times. Let's talk about this, shall we? Listen, I approve. I want everybody's input on this, and that's fine. Let me just say this to you. And I am not by any means... Did that actually focus doing that? I guess it did. I am not by any means tooting my own horn. But I will say this. I've done this kind of work for many years. I am, and have always been, an independent journalist. And I have covered many things. Say, in 2012, some months after Barack Obama signed the NDAA 2012, allowing for psychological operations and in the United States, and propagandizing the people, in military propagandizing people in the United States. Also, it opened up the entire world to this global war of terror, because it called the entire world theater of operations, because it's against terror, and terror is all over the world. And I told you then, in 2012, after the event that took place in Aurora, Colorado, I told you then that it was the beginning of something that I called the American Gladio. That it was not what it appeared. There was something very, very well organized about it. And many people looked at what I was saying. Oh, how dare you say that about these things? He says, this guy's crazy. He said, I am the Joker. But of course he didn't. And it was many, many years after that, people finally came to the conclusion, oh, wait a minute. There is a Gladio-style campaign. Some people called it Gladio 3. Some people called it... It's American Gladio. That's exactly what it is. Ah, I see. That's why it's going to do that shit. September 11th. While fellow, quote-unquote, truth activists were telling you about ray beams from space and many nukes, I came to the conclusion that it was done by controlled demolition. I told you the companies that were there on site. I told you about the special engineers that those companies used to monitor the damage to buildings beside the ones they take down that were also there on site as the buildings came down. They were the ones who supposedly told everybody that Building 7 was going to come down because they had their special equipment set up. For some reason, there in New York City, there were no other buildings that were, in case no one noticed, there were no other buildings set for demolition in New York City. But this company not only was there, but it also had licenses to move high explosives through the city of New York, which, by the way, is very difficult to get. I was right about that. And people went on with nanothermite and nuclear weapons being built into the towers. The towers were empty, holograms, all this dumb shit to distract people. I told you what really happened. And I was one of the few flyover theory. There's 1,000 of them. But now, in the end, looking back, most people understand it was a controlled demolition using conventional controlled demolition material, remote demolition, use remote controlled demolition. I told you about the helicopters that were flying around as the buildings came down and how they were using remote controlled demolition. And the reason they had to put them in helicopters was because they didn't know which way the smoke was going to be blowing. And they couldn't bring down one tower and then have the other tower still standing there. But because they couldn't get the signal through the fucking smoke and the dust, they couldn't bring down the other tower. So, helicopters. Very simple, very obvious, but very early in the process. I told you in March of 2020, when the lockdowns took place, that the lockdowns were not designed to protect you from the virus. They were designed to protect the virus from you. And I was absolutely 100% right. They invested a lot of time, money in the fucking virus, in creating the virus, in releasing the virus. And they had an end goal, which was the mRNA experimental jabs. Which, by the way, I also told you very early on, were not vaccines. When they were saying, when Rachel Maddow was telling you it was going to stop the virus and keep you from catching it and keep you from carrying it and keep you from transmitting it and keep you from getting sick and dying from it, I told you that the evidence was already out, that after you get the shot, you can catch it, you can carry it, you can transmit it, you can get sick from it, and you can die from it. And I told you then, very early on, no vaccine in history has ever been that fucking bad, that it doesn't do any of those things. And I also told you that they don't put shit together like that and put all that fucking money into something for no fucking reason. I told you there was something else going on. And of course I was attacked again, as always. I told people in 2007 when I first started writing my website, Barack Obama was a fraud, he was a fake, there was no change. I was kicked off a website I fucking made with a group of people. I was kicked off it because they were Obamaites. I told you also in 2007 that electronic voting machines, I wrote this in 2005 on places like Fire Dog Lake and Think Progress, 9/11 Blogger. I told people as early as 2005, electronic voting machines are stealing elections. It's black box voting. Of course, Bev Harris and all these people were, even Greg Palast back in the day. He doesn't do that now. He's learned his lesson now. But I told you back then, long before it was conventional wisdom, long before the Trumpites got on board with it. I tell you all these things, and there's many more. I tell you all these things in order to make one point. And that point is, I have a knack for doing this stuff. I have a knack for seeing things before this kind of stuff. I'm not good with a million other things in the fucking world. I'm not good with interpersonal relations. I'm not good with fucking investments. I'm not good figuring out Wall Street. Like I get lost in video games. And there's nothing special about me. It's just a thing that I have developed over the fucking years. And I'll tell you right now, I'm right about this. And I will be, again, ridiculed for years. That's all right. But I don't think this one's going to take that long. What am I talking about? Why'd you bring up Nazis in space, Scott? Because Nazis in this country want to go to space. I'm going to read something to you. It's a long article. I wrote it yesterday. Kind of proud of it. And again, a bunch of folks are going to fucking ridicule me and already have, but that's all right. It's happened before. It will happen again. That's just the nature of the fucking business. I am an independent journalism, and I think for myself. And I am 100% correct on this. After World War II, the United States brought some 1,600 Nazis into the country to work as engineers and specialists in various high education and skill level positions. Call it the first H-1B program. Werner von Braun was one of those scientists. He was a full-fledged Nazi who worked on the rocket development team for Adolf and helped develop the V-2 rocket, which was literally the first intercontinental ballistic missile. The Nazis used it on targets like London, Paris, and Antwerp. Werner helped the United States military develop their own version of that type of rocket until NASA got a hold of him and used him to help create the boosters that would lift the Apollo rockets into orbit for their fake moon landings. Hence what I mentioned before. While here, after the war, Nazi Werner wrote a book called Project Mars, a technical tale. I believe he wrote it while living on a military base in Texas, or at least working on a military base in Texas. Turns out the story is about post-communism world, where the United States and the rest of the world turned against the commies and blew them up by launching nukes from space. Then they decided to turn their attention, literally, from getting revenge from winning World War II, it's a Nazi writing it, remember, to looking at Mars for some reason, and lo and behold, they decide to go there. So they pack up a fleet of spaceships and fly to Mars, only to find it's already inhabited by folks living underground. Keep that in mind. It's important. Elon Musk's father, Errol, was big into rockets when he was a kid, living the good life as a white privileged child in apartheid South Africa. Elon grew up there, by the way, until he was 17. Did you also know Peter Thiel was also South African? Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, Paul Farber, and David Sachs. All children of apartheid, all big-time supporters of Donald Trump, who makes jokes about the poor not taking showers. Elon Musk contradicted a story his wife tells about how Elon got his name. His wife says Elon is a family name. Seems like it was injected into some records of her grandfather or something later in life. But Errol tells the people the truth when he's asked about it, or at least he used to, before he had to start telling people it's silly that Elon made the Bellamy salute on stage behind the presidential podium the other day. By the way, to give you an understanding of what Errol is, he once claimed racist Nazi Tommy Robinson was like Nelson Mandela. By the way, I want you to know this. That should give you a clue about how his twisted mind works. Let me stop for a second and say, all of this information I'm telling you is supported by the links. They're not wacky conspiracy theorist links. They're not Nazis on Mars links. They're not super soldier links. These are reputable fucking sources. Every single one of them. And when I tell you that this is what Errol said, the link I provide to you is of Errol saying it. It's a video of him actually saying the words coming out of his mouth. Okay? Let's move on. Anyway, Elon Musk was asked about his son's name after a bunch of waffling about how important names are. He talked about being a kid or a young man building rockets and reading a book called Project Mars. The book, written by a Nazi working for the U.S. government under Operation Paperclip and NASA. In the interview, he talks about how, after blowing up Russia to get even for World War II or some Nazi shit, when they got to Mars, they found it populated by folks living underground in vast subterranean cities connected by tunnels. That's important for later. And who was their glorious leader? The Elon, of course. Elon Musk, being the world's largest American welfare queen, gets tons of cash for developing SpaceX and Tesla. Elon and his boy Donnie Trump just announced that they plan to plant the stars and stripes on the surface of Mars. It's our manifest destiny, they claim. Did you know Elon owns a massive boring company called, creatively, The Boring Company, which was spun off from SpaceX in 2018. By the way, I think SpaceX was created in 2017. Almost as if The Boring Company and SpaceX are somehow connected for some reason. You with me? Stick around. This is where it gets interesting. Elon said before giving the Nazi salute, a man named after a character written by a Nazi, by the way, Elon, a man named after a character written by a Nazi, that this was the most important election ever, and he thanked the people of the country. He thanked the people of the country in such a powerful and emotional way. And then he gave this Bellamy salute with a fervor The kind of fervor of somebody seeing a lifelong ambition beginning to come to fruition. That's what he was thanking the American people for. Why would he thank us? It's almost as if he thought somehow this was going to benefit him somehow. The $500 billion allocated for development of AI made mRNA jabs to supposedly protect you from cancer will not be entirely spent on that particular project. This is my theory. I believe a good part of it is earmarked for development of a base in orbit, accessed by a launch site currently being built in the South Pole in order to get around the Van Allen belt, from which Elon and SpaceX will eventually launch his fleet of spaceships to fly to Mars so they can begin to bore into its surface and create the very colonies underground a Nazi scientist once wrote about. Now, of course, the timeline is the issue. How long would it take for such a monumental project to unfold? How long until Elon can become the Elon and fulfill his father's own manifest destiny? I mean, after all, Errol did compare Elon to Caesar and Napoleon in that video where he tells us how he chose his son's name. How could he possibly live long enough to see it through and rule subways and basements of Mars for any period of time? Does Trump expect all of this to take place during his 4 years in office, or will he just say fuck it and stay in office forever like Netanyahu and that corrupt Abbas in Palestine? Or Mubarak, or Salah, or Pinochet? Could be, but there's still the issue of aging. Oh, wait a minute, that's right. Elon said mRNA technology could eventually stop aging or reverse it, given enough time and experiments. It's called the epigenetic reprogramming of aging, and it is the actual point behind the mRNA experiments and their vaccines. And oddly enough, Larry Ellison, was talking about this program, and he said it would focus on AI development of mRNA vaccines to cure cancer. Larry Ellison is the deepest of the deep staters, being connected with the Department of Defense and In-Q-Tel, which is, of course, CIA. Oh, and what's the name of this $500 billion project, you ask? Stargate. Yeah, Stargate. The gateway to the stars for Elon Musk and his billionaire buddies. Why would an AI program aimed at curing cancer be called Stargate? Trump isn't concerned with homelessness or the millions without access to health care. He's not worried about his tariffs causing a new tax on the people of America or his idiotic meme coin crashing in value and costing his fans their savings. He doesn't care about ending the conflict in Ukraine. Hell, those guys are Nazis fighting Soviet Union all over again. Why not just let that one play out? He doesn't care about 2,000-pound bombs being used on children in Gaza to make ready the real estate for Gaza 2030 project. He has skin in that game too, by the way. No, the Donald doesn't care because he's giving the Elon everything his little Nazi heart desires. And if this seems wild and far-fetched to you, then you haven't been paying attention. Us conspiracy theorists haven't really been striking out as of late. In fact, I've recently seen more and more of my formerly condemned theories verified in public discourse, and I do believe that trend will continue. We never set foot on the moon, and it's only a matter of time before that fact is known. The Donald is releasing some JFK files. We'll see how comprehensive that reveal becomes. 9/11, you ready to start knowing now? And of course, the Luger Center links. Does that ring any bells? Big plans. The Fourth Reich, Sieg Heil, the reign of 1,000 years. It's not hyperbole. It's not black-pilled doom-mongering. It's reality. It's the same reality folks in Germany convinced themselves was a conspiracy theory back in the 30s. These people have unlimited access to unlimited amounts of money, and they now have access to the central bank printing press. They are closing down any agency that will oversee their operations. They have a complicit media who will ignore the warning signs and attack anyone who doesn't. Why wouldn't they? Live forever and be God Emperor of Mars? Now that's a project worthy of the Elon now, isn't it? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what I wrote. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what I believe is entirely 100% true. I could have flushed it out with more links down here at the bottom. But when I start writing, I'm like, all right, let me link this and link this. And by the time I get to about this point, I'm like, all right, fuck it. I just want to finish writing it. But all of that is true. 100% of that is true. All of it. Every little fucking bit of it. It's not hyperbole. It's not black pill doom mongering. It's reality. And people who said things in the 1930s, the Hitler's willing executioners, the good Germans, they were ridiculed. There's no such thing as concentration camps, you fucking traitor. How dare you? We're doing great right now. And you want to piss all over it. This is where we are right now. This is the situation we're in. People say that, rightly so. Listen, they just took the protection away from Anthony Fauci, the federal protection away from Anthony Fauci. After he got his blanket pardon for things he hasn't been accused of yet, blanket pardon. He could have been raping babies, not just torturing puppies. And he's got a pardon for that. They didn't give a pardon to the head of EcoHealth Alliance. In fact, they kicked him out and EcoHealth Alliance out for the next 5 years because of gain-of-function research. They said doing gain-of-function research in Wuhan, China. Turns out that the animals that were needed to make the zoonotic leap, there's only certain ones that can do it, from the bat to the human in China, they've been tested and none of them are susceptible to the fucking the novel coronavirus from the bat, which means they couldn't have done it in China. So even people like Meryl Nass are going, well, maybe they didn't do it in Wuhan, but it was still Wuhan behind it and the Chinese behind it. They did it in the Luger Center in Tbilisi, Georgia. I've talked about this until I'm blue in the goddamn face. And it was still EcoHealth Alliance. It was still the National Institute of Health. It was still the Department of Defense under the Defense Threat Reduction Agency contract. I've shown you the contracts. I've shown you fucking videos of them sampling bats to collect novel coronaviruses. I even told you that the project number for one of the contracts. That's where they made it. That's where they did the fucking gain-of-function research. And that's why you won't find any of those animals in fucking China that can even catch the novel coronavirus from the bats that they used. They can't catch it, so therefore they couldn't be used to make the zoonotic leap from the bat to humans. When you think about something a project this big, you have to ask yourself, this is beyond the pale, Scott. They would never. It's too big. Why fucking Mars? Why not Mars? Why not Mars? I mean, we're going to reach out into space. We are not a species that is content just sitting around all day long, doing nothing. We are a species that wants to explore, that wants to develop. Of course, certain people in the species, certain members of the species want to explore so that they can grab and own and take. That's what Trump meant by planting the flag. Mars will be ours. The moon will be ours. But people think something like this is just too big, it's too outrageous, and there's no way they could do it. So too is creating COVID-19 in order to bring about a massive global pandemic, in order to stick as many experimental mRNA jabs in people's arms. So too was rebuilding America's defenses, which needed only, as they put it, a new Pearl Harbor type event in order to facilitate this transition and bring about the project of the new American century. Reich of 100 years. People think this stuff. People come up with this stuff. In 1998, Brooksley Born said we've got to regulate these fucking derivatives. These derivatives are weapons of economic mass destruction. And they will crash and be used to harm the people of this country. And she was attacked. She was right. She was attacked by everybody on the left and the right in 1998. And then they had the American Dream Act to help Americans buy fucking real estate, buy a home, which the government was going to give them the fucking down payment for, to stick them in these fucking balloon payment fucking mortgages based on liar loans. This whole thing was concocted. People had the plan. As early as we know of, as early as 1998. 2007, 2008 comes along the crash, the subprime mortgage crash. All those derivatives are, in fact, economic fucking weapons of mass destruction. And that funneled the money. You had TARP, you had fucking QE1, QE2, QE Infinity. Banks were able to buy up smaller banks. It funneled the power. It funneled the money up. We're still paying for that shit. My father lost 50% of his 401k, as did, I'm sure, many of you out there. Somebody came up with that shit in 1998, at least, if not before. Someone came up with the idea to claim that gay people, socialists, activists, Jewish people, Roma, gypsies, were all dirty and nasty people, and they were the problem that Germany was facing. That's what kept Germany down. You needed to round them up and put them in work camps and make them work like slaves until they died, in order to help build the German economy. And then, of course, as they progressed, after the false flag event in fucking Poland, after they progressed throughout Eastern Europe, they had 1,000 of these things. Somebody had to come up with that shit. And I'm telling you right now, they have come up with this. And they are not that far away from it. And notice how mRNA, being talked about by Larry Ellison, and this Stargate program factors in. They're not going to cure cancer with mRNA. They're not looking to cure cancer. I'm sure some are. Most of them, the big effort here is in epigenetic reprogramming of aging. They want to live forever. Yuval Harari said something about that. The woman, what was her name? Caitlin, what was her name? Caraco, the one who got the fucking Nobel Prize for mRNA stuff. She mentioned that in an interview she gave, talking about the possibility is endless with this mRNA stuff, and you could even, at some point, stop the aging process. And of course, Elon Musk talked about it, saying with enough fucking time and experiments, is what he meant, you could stop aging, maybe reverse it. He said with all his hair plugs and his facial reconstruction surgery and his liposuction. You think that guy wants to live forever? You goddamn right he does. What do you think he was so excited about when he said, everyone always says these are consequential elections, but this one, this one really is. See, Kyle. Why do you think he's that excited? More money? You think the concept of more money does that to him? Maybe the concept of more money so we can gain power, political power. He already has it. There's something he's going to use all of that money and that power to achieve. He is, after all, the Elon. Lastly, I'll tell you this. We know there's all kinds of ways to know that we never landed on the fucking moon. And when I tell you that it's going to become proven, without a shadow of a doubt, very soon, the reality is they're putting fucking rovers on the moon and other countries are being polite about it. But all you got to do is go to the locations, the sites where we said we landed. They're pretty well known. You got a picture of it now. It's a little speck. A little dot. We can take pictures of other fucking galaxies. Better than we can take a picture of the fucking moon. Or at least that area of the moon. Why is that? Because there's nothing up there. That's why there's up. That's why. That's why. And they're going to find that out very, very soon. And when they do, people, what we have is these folks have an ambition. And their ambition is to extend the reach of the human species. The reason we couldn't do it then, even though fucking JFK said, oh, we're going to go to the moon and other things. The reason they did that staged the whole thing, was because we needed something. They wanted a slush fund, an endless, bottomless slush fund, which is what they got, which is what Project Stargate is. But we couldn't do it then because we already knew about the Van Allen belts. Period. End of story. These are is it called a torus shape? It's a donut shape around, based on the North Pole and the South Pole. A donut wrapped around, elongated on one end, shortened, flattened on the other. But a donut wrapped around the fucking planet of extremely high radiation, which protects us from the radiation of the sun. If the Van Allen belt were to disappear, we'd all be fried. The problem is we can't fly through it without being horribly irradiated and dying. Especially not in the lander that we had back in 1960 to early 1970s, that had 1/16 of an inch fucking skin. You ever go down to the NASA thing and look at the actual landers? Sheet metal skin. It's impossible. There's no motors, there's no engines powerful enough to fire a fucking rocket ship made of fucking 3-inch thick lead. We recently, about 3 years ago, launched a ship with sensors on it that went through the Van Allen belts and came back here. In that fucking ship, there were 3 fucking, like, crash test dummies. But they weren't for crashes. They were replicas of human bodies with all kinds of sensors and certain vital organs and systems to see how much radiation the astronauts, had they been in that vessel, would have taken. One was wearing one type of protective suit, one was wearing another type of protective suit, and the third was wearing nothing at all, that poor guy. They went up there, they came back, and the scientists went, ooh, we can't release this information. Why? Because it proves the point that we never set foot on the moon. However, the Van Allen belts are a donut that wraps around a ball. Donut. Clear at the top, clear at the bottom. That's the way to get past, to get through the Van Allen belts, is to go past the Van Allen belts, where it doesn't exist. Stargate. Why would they call that $500 billion project, AI project, Stargate? If you know, you know. What did Donald Trump call? Space Force, and it was fucking Star Trek. But what did he call the rollout? The Department of Defense, by the way, Department of Defense made COVID-19 in fucking Tbilisi, Georgia. What did he call the rollout, military rollout of the vaccines, quote unquote? Operation Warp Speed. And now we have Stargate. We have Space Force, which is a symbol from Star Trek. We have Warp Speed, which is from Star Trek. And we have Stargate, which is from Stargate. Which, by the way, is a story about finding a ancient portal that takes people to Mars and other places. That's a Stargate. Why Stargate for a project that's looking for a cure to cancer? They love doing shit like that, throwing little clues at you, either to mislead you, send you down a rabbit hole, or because they think they're so fucking smart that you're never going to figure it out. That's what that is. That's exactly what that is. And that is exactly why the Elon, named after a character written by a Nazi scientist, was so excited standing behind that fucking podium. Because he knows this is it. He's going to be given his big shot. This is his big, big shot. I'll give you one more example. One more recent example of these big plans of theirs and doing things that others would look at and go, there's no way that's true. And yet now, we know. October 7th was not planned by the IDF or Shin Bet or Mossad or anyone else. Hamas and the Palestinian liberation organizations that are resistance fighters in Gaza do not work for or with the collaborators at Fatah or the Palestinian Authority, and certainly don't work with these Israeli agencies. However, I believe, and have for a while, that they indeed knew it was going to happen. And that rather than having the IDF build up and make ready for it to thwart it as they started to come through the fence, I believe they started to think to themselves, well, let's think about it for a second. Let's say there was a huge body count and it terrified the people of Israel so much. How could we use that? Could that end up being the catalyst for Gaza 2030? Could that end up being the real kickoff point for us taking Lebanon, for us taking Syria, for us taking Georgia and part of Egypt and part of Saudi Arabia? Could that be the catalyst for the Greater Israel Project? And I believe that is exactly what happened, and that is exactly the choice that was made, which is why so many IDF leaders, generals, and others have resigned. Because in time, that will come out. It will come out. It's already come out. They've already had people, saying that, yes, they had fucking insight into that happening. But they said, the leaders, like Netanyahu said, yeah, but we figured that was just aspirational. They couldn't actually do that. So they can't deny that they knew it was coming. But again, there had to be that kernel, that moment of inception where someone said, hey, wait a minute, let's think about this. And I think that's what's happening with this. I think that's what's happening with the Elon. I think that's what's happening with Stargate. I think that's what's happening with Luga Center Project and the COVID project and the mRNA technology. Now, time will tell, of course, whether I'm right or wrong. And of course, you can believe in super soldiers. You can, if you like to. You can believe that it's all about the Boring Company was created the same time fucking SpaceX was created. You can believe that it's all because he's trying to build cities underground for some fucking reason. I guess global warming. Who the fuck knows? You can believe all that if you like. But I don't think these are coincidences. I don't think he creates a fucking space exploration company and a large tunnel and city underground subterranean boring fucking company at the same time, just as a coincidence. And I don't think he gave that Nazi salute for a fucking coincidence either. I think he's sending a message. I think he's sending a message. By the way, just so you know, in the book, the Mars Project, or whatever it was, the Mars Project, written by Werner von Braun, the Elon rules Mars under this technocratic fucking dictatorship, fascist technocratic dictatorship, much like the one that the oligarchs and Donald Trump are creating here in the United States with the Elon at the head. So I don't think I'm wrong. In fact, I know I'm not. But we will see. We will see. Anyway, I thank you guys for your time. Have a good Saturday, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Go Skins. Take it easy.